Today we have an interesting project. We're here putting a roof rack on a 2022 Toyota Tacoma pickup truck so that you can carry luggage and stuff. It should be a lot of fun. We're here at Dedo land. I'm Dedo. Let's get going. First things first, any project that you get that's an installation of an accessory or anything really, you want to unpack it from the packaging and be certain that all of the components are present. And by a quick glance from this one, this appears to be the right side rack along with its gasket. Left side rack along with its gasket. Left side. And then the all-important part, the hardware. All right, let's open up the hardware package. We have a couple of helpers today. Of course, as always, we have the standard Mr. Kim, the cameraman, and then we have the talented and beautiful duo of Miss Marion and Miss Anna, and the assistance of our mascot, Rue. Rue is very helpful in these kind of projects. So not a great deal of hardware, which is a good thing. Oh, instructions, these are important as well. Looks like you have some gaskets, some screws, a couple different size screws, and my way of doing this, even though when we open up the instruction booklet, it will show you what screw does what. I always try to empty this bag out like so, as careful as possible. And then I usually separate the screws by size. So it looks like we just have two different types of screws. We have these longer 6mm, it looks like, screws, and these shorter ones, and it looks like there's 8 of the short ones and 6 of the long ones, and then a number of gaskets. I'm pretty certain these gaskets are going to seal the roof at all the penetrations. And looks like a couple of mounting brackets here. They look fairly simple enough. Looks like a left and a right sort of thing there. Yep, left and a right. And now, take a look at the assembly instructions. First part of the assembly instructions. Another gasket trying to run away from us there. And it'll give you the quantities of what's in the kit. You know, the rails, the hardware bag, the brackets, and it'll confirm what we already know, the 8 6mm by 20mm and the 6 6mm by 40mm, the washers. This is all pretty basic instructions. The very first thing we're going to do here, now that we see it appears we have enough parts to make the installation, and it's important that I say that because a lot of times you'll get started in a project like this, and the first thing people will do will be to pull apart the truck to make this installation, only to find when they open the packaging there's something missing. So I always like to inventory everything, make sure it's the right thing for the application prior to doing any disassembly. So right now we're going to get set up to do the disassembly on the truck so that we can make this install. So in the unpackaging process, we found that these little rubber flaps here, this one was bent up pretty good. And to show you on the truck, that piece is eventually going to finish on this curve and tuck under this piece of window gasket. And so rule of thumb is anytime you have a misshapen rubber piece prior to the start, it's going to tax the adhesive and make that install a little bit more difficult. So we're going to massage that a little bit by hand and get it close to this shape before we try installing it. All right, a lot of times when you're working on a car, or truck, any kind of vehicle, parts for each side of the vehicle are either marked left or right. And so what that means is left or right is how the vehicle is positioned when you're sitting in the driver's seat. So essentially, the left side of the vehicle is the driver's side, the right side of the vehicle is the passenger side. Now, in this installation, there's two parts here that are the brackets that hold the roof rack in place at the front. The geometry of these pieces is obviously different, so there's a left and a right. However, on the brackets, there's no markings as to what is left and what is right. We've carefully examined those, and in the instruction, it does not determine what is left and right. So the best way to figure that out is to turn this over. This makes a big difference because when you're installing these on the roof, these brackets go on first, and it would be a bummer to have these installed and have to go reverse them once you get them up there. We're trying to figure out which one goes which way. So if you look at these brackets and how they are oriented to where they bolt through, they have these two holes. And as you can see, this piece does not line up with the holes, but this piece does. So now we know that this is the right side bracket and this is the left side bracket that lines up with the holes. The other little thing we found in flipping this over, this little trim panel push pin is set in here with some adhesive. This one was rolling around in the box. It goes in here, but it doesn't hold on its own. So we're gonna get some RTV and we're gonna set that in there and glue that in. So once you've made that determination on which side is left and right, and so you don't get confused again because these are gonna come back off, we'll mark them. Little silver Sharpie, that's the right side, and that's the left side. To determine which side is left and which side is right, again, these pieces don't appear to have any markings on them, so you have to use logic in this case, which we use here at Dedo Land an awful lot. I usually refer to it as deductive reasoning. So what you do is you flip the piece over to see how it fits on the truck. So this is the front of the piece, and this bracket, this is the crossbar bracket. So now that you know that this is the front of the piece and the crossbar bracket has to pivot out of here to go across, you know this is the outside. So this piece here would be the right side. And that's how you would determine it, and that'll help you moving forward. In determining the installation procedure, you want to know which screws go where. Look at the instructions and you can determine that out pretty easily. And what we've determined kind of shows you there. There's 4 holes in the front and 6 holes in the rear for installing the rack to the roof itself, and then there's additional holes for installing the rack to the bracket. So if you count the holes, it makes it pretty simple. There's 1, 2, 3, 4 holes in the front to get the short screws on either side. That's a total of 8. And 1, 2, 3 holes in the center and rear. And so by the number of screws, it makes it pretty easy. There's 6 long ones and 8 short ones. Short ones up front, long ones in the rear. Pretty easy. And then there's gaskets for every screw. Okay, we're getting ready to do the disassembly now that we know that we have all the parts that we need. Do a little wipe down here. These are the rubber trim rings from the factory, and if need be, you can get in here with a tool and do it. If you're going to do that, have a rag handy so that you don't scratch the paint, and you can get in here with a tool and help you out a little bit. In this case, it doesn't seem like that's necessary. It seems like we can just pull these up, and I know that there's some adhesive on this, and we got to just get past the adhesive. And see, that piece pulls out fairly simply. More adhesive. Got it. Last little trim piece here. Pulls out just like that. It's that simple. You can see what that looks like. These are pieces that we can now discard. We will not need. This is a real basic process here too. Just take a little cleaner and just clean these areas out. They've got some road dirt that has over time has gotten captured in there, and no need to leave that in there to make your job easier and your final product look good. Let's just clean that up a little bit. Also, you will see that there are a couple of taped over holes here that we want to open up because this is where the screws are going to go in, and it doesn't require a whole lot of effort. Just a little pocket knife action usually will do it, and there's that hole exposed. The other thing is there's still some leftover adhesive in here, and you can spend a little bit of time, and I've often found that just using your finger and fingernail and just being patient and slowly peel that out of there will help get it out so that there's no interference between this and the new roof rack. I think it's a good idea to pre-fit everything before you screw everything down or get all your parts up here. Obviously the the rubber base is what goes on first, and you want to make sure that it lays in, particularly back here where it trims back to the rear window. Make sure it lays in there pretty nice, that all the holes line up. And up front here, there was a little abandoned bracket that was used to hold on that original trim. And now I just wanted to make sure that this little cutout on the gasket cleared it. So that's pre-fit, and that looks like it'll work pretty good. So the next thing we're gonna do is we're gonna install the mounting bracket. When we go back to our original fitting, and remember we marked this as the right bracket, and so that goes where these two holes are, right there. And they line up pretty good. But remember, we have these little gaskets, so they go underneath this bracket and where the holes are, and then once you tighten the bracket down, they'll create a watertight seal so that nothing gets through and into the compartment of the truck. We'll get these in here and we'll get these started by hand. I think this is important that you start any screw or bolt by hand so you can feel it, unless it's really difficult to get to and you can use a tool, but you want to feel that engagement of the threads because they're machine threads, and the machine threads will strip and make it very difficult to make this installation nice. So run these in as far as we can here. Another thing I want you to notice is that these 6mm screws come with a 10mm head and a Phillips arrangement. I prefer to use the hex head to tighten these down because it's a more positive engagement. I've watched a number of videos that are installing this same piece and they're using impact guns and drill drivers. I would recommend not doing that because you don't get a good feel on the tightness of the screw using that method. What you do with a small ratchet and small socket. And I can feel that screw tightening up and squishing, and I have a really nice feel on that, the torque that we're able to put on that. I can feel that that's pretty tight. You'll even notice that I'm not using all of the leverage of the ratchet, just holding my hand over the center because I don't believe it needs a whole lot more than that. I'll take the rubber piece, put that in there, get that lined up. Oh, one thing we forgot, we need 3 gaskets. These rubber gaskets are going to be remote. Once we put the roof rack up there, it'll be difficult to see, and I don't want them to slide around. So I'm just putting a little dab of RTV on them to kind of hold them in place where they belong, and that'll make it easier when we go to put the roof rack on. Okay, now we're gonna take that right side piece, put it on here, and then we're gonna open it up to expose the bolt holes. Okay, right now we're in the initial fitment stage. And you'll remember we uncovered the holes in the roof. And so in order to determine that everything will bolt on right, you want to index this piece by starting one of these screws. So I've got one screw started right here, but I'm looking through here and I'm seeing it's not lining up with the bracket that we installed. That tells me that the bracket needs to be shifted back a little bit. So we're going to pull this off, we're going to shift the bracket, and we're going to reinstall. It takes a little patience to get all these holes lined up, but we did get them lined up. And these screws will go in a little bit harder than a normal nut and screw because there's a little bit of paint in the threads of the screws from the factory, and so it makes them go in a little bit harder. But one of the tricks to this is these screws, the larger screws, go through the roof, are fixed, yet these smaller screws are on a bracket, and it requires you to augment that bracket a little bit, sometimes using a drift, sometimes a little percussion adjustment to get those screw heads lined up into this bracket. This bracket can be moved so that these screws can get in it. These are fixed in the roof and cannot be moved, so these are the ones that you index off of. As you can see, everything's installed, everything's nice and tight. So now we're going to put it in the stowed position so that it eliminates wind noise when you're not using it as a roof rack. All right, so now you can see the rack is in the stowed position. so that when you're going down the road, it eliminates any additional wind noise of the crossbars. And that's it. The following day, we had the litmus test with a little rainstorm, and the rubber gaskets just didn't cut it. So I had to disassemble the roof rack and use silicone to seal everything up. That seemed to do the trick because it rained the rest of the day, no more leaks. Today's example is a Tacoma pickup, but I recommend using this method on any vehicle. All right, it's really important to have the right help when you're doing these kind of jobs, and we want to thank Rue for everything she's done on our roof rack. And so we're going to call it the Roofrack in this episode. Thank you, Rue. It was a cool little project doing this Toyota roof rack. It's going to help Marion and Ann out tremendously. They do a lot of traveling and camping and kayaking and all that kind of stuff. It'll work out really nice for them and allow them to keep room in the bed of their truck for other gear. And it went pretty well, as you can see. Maybe figure on a couple of hours time to do it if you follow it in sequence. I wanted to show you how this project is to be done from a mechanical sense. And so having the right tools, having the right rigging, ladders instead of standing on the sill of the truck, having to start with a clean shop and a clean slate, how to organize everything and get it going. And at the end of the job, the most important thing is put everything back away and keep it clean. That's how Dedo does things. That's how I recommend you guys do things. And that's my tip for this sequence. Have a great one. Thanks for being here. Don't forget to like and subscribe.